Welcome to your favorite buy or try yearly West Virginian Sinclair podcast. I'm your good buddy, your pal, good old Amiga Aaron, joined by Gooder the Brent.
I be the besterest.
Oh man, that's good old West Virginia English right there. Well done, sir. Hey, it's been a while since we hopped into the R. Sinclair seats, Brent. Are you fired up for some sweet, incredibly sweet R. Sinclair action?
I can't wait to hate on ZX Sinclair.
You know, when you told me what you wanted to play this week, I'm not going to lie to you, I was not surprised because of the subject matter. We'll get to that in a moment. Now, today's game has been oft compared to the classic game Zaxxon, which appeared way back in the day of the arcades. I remember distinctly seeing this game, Zaxxon, I should say, featured on Entertainment Tonight. It was so groundbreaking that it made the entertainment show. It was one of two video games I ever saw on there. Entertainment Tonight featured Zaxxon and Dragon's Lair, but Zaxxon actually got a lot of press back when it came out. I know you were a tiny little lad back then. Do you remember seeing Zaxxon?
Oh, I remember. Oh, yeah. I remember Zaxxon. You know what's odd? I remember Zaxxon less for the graphics and the effects and more for the stick. Because it had one of those... It had one of the big flight sticks.
Yeah, they worked pretty well for that game. You know, that game was one of the first games that I ever saw that I was like, look at the graphics. We've hit it. You know, we've done it. If I had a nickel for every time I've said that, it's happened so many times where I couldn't believe the graphics of it, the isometric false 3D view. And Lord, how many games has that game spawned? It's one of those trailblazers that came out of nowhere and then got copied ad nauseum. But I thought Zaxxon was a pretty good game. I mean, right out of the gate. And I played a lot of, still play it. I mean, was it a favorite of yours?
I would certainly not call it a favorite.
Really?
I mean, Zaxxon's good, and I absolutely respect a lot of the things Zaxxon's did, but I'm not a huge fan of isometric games, and I found the height, the up and down controls of Zaxxon to be very infuriating, especially when you're kind of doing the dogfight section.
Yeah.
Because I never felt like I could line up. Now, back then, I didn't realize that when you lined up with something, there was a crosshair on it.
An X, yeah.
And I didn't know that back in the day. I just could never line up and shoot the things. And it was very frustrating for me.
It's one of the things about Zaxxon. That is one of the beefs against it, was that moving up and down in it was difficult to gauge your height. And it wasn't that they didn't put in a lot of stuff to help you. There's a gauge. They put crosses up whenever you are on the same level as enemy fighters. But it's just that it's hard to move freely in that world and understand the depth and position of enemies given your viewpoint, and that makes it tough. But I thought they did and this was also uncharted territory. I think they did a pretty good job for what they had to work with and figured out. It's funny, and I always hated that. If you've ever played Zaxxon, you start buzz bombing a base, then there's a space area, then there's another base, and that space area was always my least favorite. Somewhere I lost all my guys out there. It was the hardest part. But I learned some tricks to get through it. One thing I like to do is just go all the way to the bottom and to the left and just stay there spamming the thing. One thing a lot of people don't know is if you kill planes on the first base, you'll have less planes to kill out in space. So there's also a strategy there. It is nice if you can kill all those planes, you get a bonus. So I like that. But yeah, did you ever play much Super Zaxxon, which was a follow-up? I thought that was a decent little game.
Not ever.
Nope. You know, Zaxxon's a game. It got remakes and redid a few times, but I don't think they really never necessarily made it better. I mean, I like the beauty and the simplicity of the original, and again, a game that was often used as the basis for the games, which is why we're talking about it, because this week Brent dug around, and I'd have to say this is a game I hadn't played before, Brentster, and he came up with H.A.T.E. That's H period, A period, T period, E period, hostile all-terrain encounter. Now, this game, of course, for the Spectrum, this was a game that was released in '89 and developed by an outfit called Vortex Software. They developed a couple things that I know, at least one thing me and Bo looked at, which was Deflector. They also did Alien Highway, Revolution, TTL. This was published by Gremlin, so no small publisher there. And this was programmed by someone who's pretty famous, Costa Panay. I think Panay. I think that's the way it's pronounced, but don't hold that against me. Of course, he pretty famous for doing Deflector, plus pretty much all the ones I mentioned above there. And I believe this was the last game that Costa did on the ZX. This is, of course, for the 48K. Another thing this game's known for is that it was also worked on by Ben Daglish. He's a pretty big deal in the ZX community. So you had a pretty good pedigree on this thing, Brent. How'd you come across this, by the way, if I may ask?
I was looking just at Spectrum Games because I knew we were trying to find something to play, and I was like, H.A.T.E. I had the list. I was scrolling through it. I was like, H.A.T.E. It's like, man, I don't hate the Spectrum. I'm gonna see what H.A.T.E. is, and I loaded it up, and that awesome intro screen.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, okay, I'm on board. So I chose it before I even actually played the game. And then I played the game, and I was pleasantly surprised.
The intro screen is awesome. It's a big, beautiful picture of the H.A.T.E. fighter there, which it's one thing I like about these sorts of things. If you're watching at home, you can see. Look at it. It's got the both the fighters you use, and this is a real beautiful screen. The loading screens on the ZX were great. I should mention the original price on this thing, Brent, was a mere £8.95, so pretty reasonable. And this got several other releases. We're going to get into this a bit later. This got released on the Amstrad, the Amiga, the Atari ST, and the Commodore 64. So this got multiple releases. Now, Brent, why don't you explain to everybody, what exactly are you doing in this game?
H.A.T.E., you are traveling a isometric landscape that has about 5 or 6 levels of terrain, going up and down, and you're flying through it. So you feel like you kind of dip down into valleys, and then you go up over mountains, and you can't crash, which is the best thing ever, because they could have easily added height in this game and made it super annoying, but they didn't do that. If you go too
little bit of height,
Well, no, I mean, like, there is up and down travel. There's height
but
travel,
not much.
but you can't crash.
Right.
You can't crash into the
that would have been
a mountain or anything.
I agree. Yeah.
So if you get too low, you just kind of skate across the bottom. And you can max out, and then of course you just can't go any higher. So you start out this game and you're in a fighter jet, and you travel across the terrain, all the terrain, and pick up canisters. And if you don't have canisters and you get to your base, you just blow up. I guess they don't lower the force field and let you in. So you travel landscape, of course, things that are attacking you. Some things are stuck on the ground, so you can just fly over top of them. But normally you're getting chased by either other enemy jets or these mine objects. And the mines are what you think of like when you see a sea mine. It's got the big spikes protruding out. And those actually will float up and down or bounce along the landscape. So you have to move up and down to target them, which in this game, since the up and down is not as prevalent as in something like Zaxxon, if you don't line up perfectly in the very beginning, you can just move up and down just a little bit and figure it out. It's not that huge, wide burst that you have in like Zaxxon. So you go along and you shoot these little depots and get canisters. And the canisters serve 2 functions. There's score at the end of the level. And like I said, if you have 0, they won't lower the shields at the end, and you just hit the shields and blow up. I guess you didn't do your job, so you can't come in. But they also have a sonic ring effect where if you're carrying a canister and you get hit, instead of dying, you'll just lose a canister. And if you get hit having no canisters, you will just blow up. So you get to the first base checkpoint, and you land your fighter jet, and then you just start driving out in a tank, and the tank, you can't go up and down. Obviously, you can't fly up and down. But what you can do in the tank that you can't do in the fighter jet is move forward and back in the board. That's what your up and down becomes. And it's a completely different experience. The tank has a lot of things where one half of the board will be blocked off with a mountainside, so you have to take the narrow path, and then the narrow path is always full of enemies. Another thing you can do in the tank that you can't do in the plane is pull back on the stick, and it will actually raise your cannon. And when you shoot, instead of shooting straight, you'll actually shoot in lobs. And it's not real useful, and that's unfortunate. You can shoot higher up enemies, flying
I
enemies
never
with
did
it
that, by the
sometimes.
way. I never used that. I knew you could,
Yeah,
but I never used it.
like I said, it's not super
It's
useful,
neat,
but it's
though.
neat
Yeah.
that it was
Yeah,
included.
yeah, I agree.
And then when you get to the tank, as long as you have at least one canister at the end of the tank level, you park your tank and you get back in your plane and take off again. And it just repeats. I got to about stage, I think like 16.
Oh, really?
And then I didn't die. I just quit.
Does the canister entry go up? Is there points where you have to have like 2 or 3? I
No,
never got
I
that
never.
far to where
Yeah, I never had a point where I couldn't get in with just one
it
canister.
seems like they said there were 30 levels. So there's
Oh, I wish I'd have known that. Like I said, the game is not overly difficult. It is something that you can pick up once you get the controls. You'll be blasting through the game in no time. I think on about my third or fourth game, like I said, I played to the point where I felt fulfilled, and then just moved on.
You know, this game has a lot of. First of all, this game is a looker. It really shows off what
Yeah.
the Spectrum can do. I mean, obviously, the Spectrum is not what a big color machine, but what it can do, it really shines in these isometric games, and this is one of the best. It's got a pretty decent. I mean, it's not the smoothest scroll you're ever going to see, but it scrolls nicely.
It's good. I thought it was real good.
I mean, consider what you're looking at and the shapes and stuff. I mean, it's way more. The landscape is way more diverse than it is in Zaxxon. You're going up little hills and mountains, like for instance, there's alleys that appear. I mean, it's not like Zaxxon at all, where you're just always flat with just some walls. I mean, there's a lot more stuff here. Up in normally this is a turn off, but in the upper left corner, there's like the H.A.T.E logo, and it's cool look. I mean, really stylized. And then you've got your scoreboard and stuff in the bottom right. What I like is it sort of slightly overlaps the game, so it's almost like you're watching this from afar. It's a neat effect.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, I like this game a lot, a lot. Did you play this with the keyboard, or did you wire up a joystick to this one?
Yeah, I played it with keyboard.
This
I thought it was very comfortable.
This
with
thing
keyboard.
has Kempston support, but I went ahead and just used the keyboard because I usually do. And once I've got the habit of how the buttons worked, I didn't have any trouble. I really thought this was a fun game. It's funny, it took me a while to understand. I had to actually talk to Brent about. I didn't fully understand the concept of picking up the cylinders, I died a few times going across that finish line. I was like, couldn't figure out what was going on. This game's not perfect. I mean, I love the way it looks, and I like the concept. Any game where you get to play 2 different vehicles is cool. Me and you are both big fans of Silkworm and Swiv, and games like that, or even like something like a Spy Hunter. So I like the fact that you get to switch, and I like the fact that the 2 vehicles have at least some subtle differences. Oh,
I thought I definitely think they were different enough. Where the tank is obviously stuck on the lowest thing. The terrain feels more interesting because you actually see your tank moving up and down with the terrain.
Right.
Also, the plane never goes through any of the valleys where you've got a hillside on one side, and I thought that was an interesting thing because this produces. I mean, I had probably 6 or 7 enemies on the screen at the same time, and it gives you plenty to shoot at, which is nice.
Yeah,
I thought that was a really nice enemy count. Of course, this is a high score game, and it tells you how much it kind of hints on how much score you'll get if you can make it to the end with the amount of canisters you have. I thought that was kind
Yeah,
of
that
neat.
was interesting. That was it confused the heck out of me at first. You know, the this game has a real, now maybe it's just because I'm getting older, but this thing has a real slow crawl. I mean, one thing's about your jet and your tank, they're not going to win any awards for speed. They just
Oh
sort of
yeah, I agree.
lazily go over this terrain, and all the other enemies are pretty lazy too. You just kind of it's this is a game where you don't have to, like, it's not manic. It's not a manic, but I mean, and I think that's probably the knock against it. But I mean, really, Zaxxon was not mega manic either. So
Well,
I think the comparisons between this and Zaxxon, I can see why they're there. But really, in a lot of ways, this is sort of a deeper game than Zaxxon in terms of what what you've got going on. I mean, Zaxxon's pretty straightforward. This has got a lot more. There's a lot more subtle nuances to this game than you would see in a Zaxxon. Wouldn't you say?
this game doesn't use speed as a difficulty measure. It uses amount of opponents and hazards on screen.
Yeah.
So,
and the amount of people on the screen never seen this. I mean, of course, now I'm emulating this right now. And by the way, fingers crossed, but my Amiga headboard that has ZX support should be coming this week, hopefully. But I had to emulate this. But I mean, I didn't see any sort of slowdown. Everything seemed to run.
No,
at a
there
nice
was
steady
definitely
clip.
slowdown.
Oh, did you see how much? You must have got a lot more
Yeah.
enemies than I did.
Yeah, whenever you get above, it's mostly because there's an enemy that you shoot that will split off into 2 additional enemies. And if you get a fleet of those and then shoot them all but don't kill their little spawnlings, you can definitely notice a slowdown. But even with that said, it was never so slow that it was detrimental. It was just your normal slowdown.
I like the fact that that you've also got, aside from the fact that you're shooting bad guys, you've also got to shoot like blocks and stuff to clear the path, which is cool. I will say some of the, I've got a problem with some bad guys in games where they just make these generic shapes up and they kind of come at you. But I will say this game, it has some stuff that you could sort of pretend that are enemies, but some of the shapes they do. You mentioned those kind of spiked ball looking things that kind of hover around and bounce or whatever. Yeah. You can get a group of these things, and it is almost hypnotic to watch them. They kind of rotate, and it's real unusual. I don't think I've ever seen it quite like that on the Spectrum. And I thought that was a
all
neat
the
effect.
enemies have fun little animations and designs.
There was someone sat down and really put a lot of effort into tweaking the little characters. I mean, obviously, as I mentioned, the guys that did this had a lot of goodwill and are popular. So I'm wagering that their popularity came because they are awesome at what they do, and so that's what this was. By the way, just for fun, I want to mention, when this game started, were you puzzled why you couldn't move or do anything until the game?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. There's a long runway at the beginning. In fact, I think it's the only long runway in the game. The rest of them are these real small.
No, there's several.
That length. It's the funny thing about this spaceship is that you can at the beginning you get this real long runway, but a lot of places the runway is like tiny, just maybe twice as long as the jet. Yeah. He can still get up in the air. Of course, at those speeds, it shouldn't be a problem. What did you think of the sound in this thing?
I was one quick thing about the runway thing.
Yeah.
If you look up in the corner, it actually says auto.
Yeah, I saw
that.
To
signify that it's under auto control.
Yeah.
And that actually, that was a good addition because when I couldn't move, I was freaking out thinking I didn't know the controls. And then I noticed it said auto. I was like, okay, that makes sense because it does the beginning and end of every stage.
Yeah.
Takes control. So it kind of parks the tank for you and takes the jet off for you. So all in all, I thought that was a welcome change.
Just for fun, Brent, I as I mentioned, this was released on the Atari ST, the Amstrad, and the Amiga, as well as the C64. And so I had a look at those different versions here. And I will say, of course, as you can imagine, you're going to get better colors you're going to get, of course, the Amiga being a 16-bit machine, you're going to get everything should be better, But I'll have to say that while they do look sharper, to a certain degree, I don't necessarily think visually it's a huge leap. I mean, from looking at it. What do you think, Brent?
The problem I have with the Amiga version
Yeah.
is they were in the ZX Spectrum version, it has a tile set, and it's very clearly a tile set, and it kind of looks spacey, and futuristic. The Amiga doesn't have a tile set; they have dirt and land.
I mean,
and
it still
what
looks
that
like squares though and stuff.
Well, no, not in the dirt section.
It's not as pronounced. I'll grant you that.
And the problem with that is that it doesn't. The ridges and stuff don't look as well defined. Now, the plain section, they look fine, but it's the tank sections that I really have a problem with it. Also, none of the versions. I mean, they all run pretty slow.
Yeah.
I think the Spectrum version is probably one of the faster ones.
It's funny. I will say, I didn't look at the ST I did look at the Amstrad. The Amstrad, it looks like the Amstrad once again got struck with a port from its cousin, the Spectrum, because they looked very similar. But the other two, the Amiga and the C64, I watched some playthrough footage of them, and you're right. They don't run at what I would call a fast clip. I think they look different. I mean, they obviously have the same game. I don't necessarily see the need to go from one to the other. It's like I don't think I would just kick. In fact, I'd say the CCC or the ZX Spectrum port would hold up against any of these in terms of the gameplay. I think they all got the same sort of roots, but they still look good. The Amiga one has some some nice shading and whatnot. But I mean, it's also weird to see the Amiga even running a game like this. It's just kind of odd.
Yeah.
And none of them added any sort of backgrounds. I mean, even the Spectrum has like a space scene in the back, sort of, up in the corner. And these don't have anything. They're just completely black. Kind of weird. It struck me as odd.
I would say I don't know what this was originally designed on.
I think it was designed on the Spectrum first. I'm pretty sure that was its system of origin.
Yeah, and in my opinion, everything else was kind of a get it out money grab, because it definitely seems to play faster and smoother on the Spectrum than anything else.
I looked up some reviews on this Brentster, see how people liked it. So, your Sinclair gave this a 90. It liked it. It said it was a brilliant shoot 'em up and worth a play. 30 levels for $8. What a deal! The games machine gave this an 80. They didn't like the monochrome graphics. Where have they been? Because they're all like that. That was something they pointed out in the article. Crash gave this a 78. It says it's sort of repetitive, and it could be.
That's fair.
Yeah, it is. It is a little repetitive. And Ace gave this a 64. They called it hugely unoriginal, and they said that the system, the lives per level system, means the game could go on for too long, and it gets repetitive, and so, with levels constantly being replayed, and which that can't happen if you don't get the cylinder limit. So, where do you feel it will stay on this thing, Brent? Overall, what's your final thought?
I think this is worth emulating if you have the ability, or worth playing if it's available to you. The difficulty is low, and I think that is
unusual
unfortunate
for a Spectrum game.
Yeah, and but it definitely offers enough to warrant loading it up and giving it a play, because as I played it, I had fun with it. Are you going to spend hours on it? No. But I think you could easily get 30 minutes out of this and have fun and see something, the Spectrum in a light that, I mean, sure, they have a lot of isometric games, but I felt this was a very unique take on the Zaxxon isometric kind of thing.
It's funny. I thought this game was a near miss. I mean, I really liked it, but I think this could have been a great game. And the things that they dropped the ball on, and we've got to consider, I mean, this was 89, so they knew what was going on. It's not like that's a fairly late release. for the Spectrum. But this is another one of these games we always talk about with Spectrum Next out. This would be a great game to revisit because you could really spice the levels up considerably and really not need a whole lot more horsepower. I'd like to see more like obstacles. I'd like to see some variance in the levels. Maybe even take that jet and go out in the space, or like Zaxxon. It would be kind of neat to try something like that. So, but overall, I really enjoyed this game. It was a surprise to me. I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed playing it, and it's one I'll actually probably go back to, Brinster.
And as much as I hate to say this, horrible title.
Why?
H.A.T.E is a horrible title.
Right, but it stands for something cool.
But it doesn't matter. No one knows what it stands for when you look at it.
Get your attention, though.
No, I think that
it doesn't fit the game. That's for sure.
That's what I'm saying.
I'll give you that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But I mean, the word hate. If you spell it all out, the what was the whole thing? The hostile all-terrain encounter. That makes sense. That part.
Not really.
Well, I mean, it is all-terrain because you're going on. You got the plane and the thing. Something else that would have been neat. This is a much bigger ask. Simultaneous 2-player, a la.
Oh no! Why?
Come on, because it'd be fun. So one guy, you've got 2 vehicles, man. Let it go.
I don't think that would add anything to the game.
I think it would be fun. That's my personal opinion. Hey everyone, thanks for checking us out today on our Sinclair. We're gonna try to start pumping these out a little more regularly, and we'd like to thank all of our friends, all the Patreons, all the people that support us. We will be back again next time with another interesting title, and until then, I bid you all a fond adieu.